Hi everyone, welcome to my presentation. Today I will be talking to you about the iron cross and the physics behind it. So what is the iron cross, you ask? The iron cross is an exercise on the steel rings or gymnastics rings in which the body is suspended upright while extending the arms laterally, forming the shape of a cross. This exercise is super intense, super crazy. Based on a lot of athletes is like profiles, they usually state that it takes them years to be able to accomplish um, arms that like horizontally, and that's because these muscles right here, well, they're actually behind, but the rotator cuff are pretty small, and unless you've had the proper training and the proper strength buildup, you are very likely to damage that. And if you damage that, it's a really difficult muscle to rehabilitate from. And well, this guy right here, Sam McCulloch, he's a gymnast for the U.S. team, and he's obviously had a lot of time to work out, and he's ready for that. So aside from the raw strength that these athletes have when performing on the steel rings, they're also aware of their centers of gravity and how they can be beneficial for them when performing. So if we look on the left picture right here, this body will have a hard time staying stable on the steel rings because the center of gravity is offset from the pivot point. So another way to think of it would be like Tarzan swinging down a vine. You know how he's always sticking his arms forward and the vine's in front of him. He'll never be able to like, I guess, stay still in the air without moving. He'll always move, like swing forward or swing down because of the offset of the center of gravity. And the ideal position, if you want your body to be horizontal like that, would be to have the cable right next to like your core, your torso, and that's because your center of gravity will be directly parallel to the pivot point, and that'll like prove beneficial if you're trying to do a hirondelle um, exercise or move, whatever you want to call it, and or a back lever. As you can see, the cables are right in the middle of their body, which is their center of gravity. But for the iron cross, we don't really have to worry about that because you can't really um, offset yourself as much as opposed to these moves because your body is vertical and the cable is much more closer to your center of gravity. So your arm muscle, like the muscles in your arms and shoulders, forearms will definitely be like taking care of keeping you steady. So it's always good to know like equations, your physics equations for wanting to figure out and explain what's going on in these scenarios. And aside from physics equations, you also want to know conditions for equilibrium, since there's two of them. And the first one is that the net force in all directions must be zero, meaning your body cannot be moving in any direction, it has to be still. And the net torque acting on the object must also be zero. So you're not going to be like spinning around and in different directions, you're stable right there in midair. And here's our torque equation, our angular momentum equation, and our moment of inertia. These two are more so for like when the athletes do like somersaults and they want to jump off of the stills to do like triple backflips or double backflips. Not so much for the iron cross. And then right here we find our values. As you can see, we got our two forces right here. This is the force from the shoulder joint onto the arm, and this is the force of the muscles, the shoulder muscles. Our axis of rotation is the entire arm because these athletes can rotate about this axis super fast in both directions, clockwise, counterclockwise. And we also want to take into consideration the size of the shoulder muscle, since that'll like affect the torque of the following equation in the next slide. And then also the force of your arm on the ring is 1/2 the weight of the athlete. Here's the free body diagram of that arm. We have our forces right here. We have our orientation. Here's the length of the arm. Broke down the forces into components. Good rule of thumb. And once we have all that, we set up our equation. The sum of all torques equal to 0. And so we have the torque of the ring minus the torque of the muscles. So this one was the torque was going counterclockwise and the muscles was going clockwise, which is why it's minus. And then what makes up the torque of the ring? That's the force of the hand times the length of the arm. And what makes up the torque of the muscles is the force of the muscles times sine of the angle at which they were in times the length of the shoulder muscle size. And we still keep that equal to 0. And then from there we just solve for the force of the muscles. And you can double check that if you feel I'm wrong. So in the handout that was provided, there will be this same image, but it'll have a little bubbles or squares pointing at the muscles that are pointing at the muscles and naming them and labeling which ones are in charge of keeping the athlete stable while performing the iron cross or just performing on the steel rings in general. And now a short clip to see Sam McCulloch from the first slide perform the iron cross.
Whatever he just did. Over to the rings and concentration for Sam McCulloch in first after the 2 rotations.
And we saw him standing at the chalk bucket right before that. He's told us that he has to focus so much on mental training now. His body not always capable of doing so many numbers, but the mental aspect, especially with all the pressure, has been really crucial for him.
All about doing perfect strength moves. Like their very nice position, holds it plenty long. Do another strength part right here. Back up rise to a flange. Does that position great. Just has a little bit of bent elbow.
The iron cross.
It's kind of scaled back on the ambition of the strength. Although this is very hard, he was at times doing even more. I had thought it was a little too much. Great fight in that handstand. Here comes that dismount. Double. Oh, and uncharacteristic. For Sam, that little shimmy